All right, welcome in, guys. Farzin Vasugian here with you for another episode of the Chief Zone podcast. Mandatory mini camp underway. A lot of things to get into here on this episode of the Chief Zone podcast. Obviously, we'll be reacting to some of the highlights from mandatory mini camp. Going to get into some of that. And again, keep in mind, it's mini camp, so can't put too much stock in what's happening there, but that's all we have to go off of right now. So we'll talk about that here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Travis Kelce did a press conference on Tuesday and had some interesting things to say, including questions he answered regarding retirement in his near future. Chris Jones also spoke to the media. He had a lot of things to say, including some comments about Clark Hunt's F- grade. You do not want to miss this. It was very colorful. He had a lot of things to say in today's press conference. Also, Chris Jones was asked about the 20 sacks because he did tweet earlier in the offseason about attaining that goal. Can he make that happen this year? Also, one NFL player not at mandatory minicamp, and a lot of people reacting to that. All of that and much more here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Welcome in, guys. My name is Farzin Vasugian. Appreciate you guys taking time to download and listen to this episode of the podcast. For those of you watching live on Facebook and YouTube, I appreciate all of you guys as well, making this podcast part of your day, whatever it is you're doing while the podcast is on for you guys. All right, let's get right into it. Before we do that, I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the place to go for your ticketing needs, whether you want to go to a sporting event, a concert, whatever it is you're trying to get to. SeatGeek is the place to go. And if you're a new SeatGeek customer, I've got a nice little bonus for you. You can use my promo code Farzin, and you will save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. So go to SeatGeek.com. Enter the promo code Farzin at checkout if you're a new SeatGeek customer, and you'll save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. All right, let's get into it. Right now, OTA's over with, and the Chiefs have mandatory minicamp going on. All NFL teams have that going on this week, and basically the way this all works out, you have mandatory minicamp. It's a 3-day deal. Obviously mandatory, so you are required to attend. And if you don't attend, you could get fined for this. That is up to the teams whether or not they want to follow up on enforcing those fines there. So that's how that works. And that's why I mentioned a certain player out there not at mandatory minicamp. So we'll get into that one a little later. But as far as some of the highlights we've heard and seen out there from the media, Rashee Rice has had a pretty good minicamp so far, especially Tuesday. That was his best day so far. Hollywood Brown making some noise, not just in OTAs, but also in minicamp as well. Seems like he and Mahomes are definitely getting things down. And Hollywood spoke to the media today and was talking about getting into a rhythm and building a chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, which, I think you go back to, and Patrick Mahomes has done this many times, not just this offseason, but in off seasons past, where, he's obviously in Dallas for a majority of the offseason. So he invites a lot of the players to come train with him. And, we saw Luis Rizamet down there, a newcomer. Hollywood Brown, a newcomer who's been down there. I think Xavier Worthy was down there training with Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown before OTAs got underway. And you're seeing a lot of the activity from down south, and a lot of that's starting to pay off. I think that really does. It really does pay off and bodes well for an NFL team. You see Mahomes do this for so long, and it gets to a point where you get to know the guys. And I think, I can't remember who said this. I want to say it was Tim Grunhard on Soren Petro's show, who talked about how, when you're the quarterback of a team, you're obviously the leader. There's no question about it. The quarterback is the position in the sport. Whenever a team is playing so well, what's the number one thing everyone talks about? The quarterback, whoever the quarterback is for that team. And when you're as big as Patrick Mahomes, you kind of are obligated. You have this responsibility to try to make sure you get to know everyone on the team. Uh, Not saying you got to be friends with every single person on the roster. That's impossible to do, but you got to make sure everyone on that team feels like they're cared for, that they feel like they're important to this team. And what better way than have the quarterback of the team do so? So I think when Hollywood Brown talks about that connection and alludes to, working together in Dallas before they start all of these offseason practices, I think that really is going to translate into success down the line. And, obviously, coaches are around, so a lot of it's on your, and not just, going out to a football field and tossing the football, trying to get routes down and whatnot, but they're actually training together. If you guys saw the Netflix series Quarterback last year, you got familiar with Bobby Stroop, Patrick Mahomes' personal trainer, and a lot of the Chiefs' offensive players were training along with Bobby Stroop. Now, I don't know how all of that's working, if Mahomes is maybe covering the cost for those guys, especially since Mahomes even mentioned a lot of those guys are in hotels or Airbnbs while they're down there in Dallas. Mahomes, meanwhile, obviously the guy with all the money is staying in his own home, but he praised those guys for taking the time to go down there in Dallas and train to get things down. So it's good to see a lot of that. But, man, I'm excited to see what this team's going to do. Teresa's asking, why was Worthy held out? Worthy is dealing with a hamstring injury right now. It's not ideal that your top draft pick, especially one that you traded up for, is dealing with that right now. But a hamstring injury in the middle of June, it's not the scariest thing in the world. If he's not available to start off training camp, I'd be a little concerned. I would start asking questions. I'd be like, hey, what's up? What's going on here? Because this is not a time. Well, I mean, okay, in June, it's not a terrible deal, but the Chiefs are investing so much in trying to build a good wide receiver group. Obviously, it's mandatory to do because of what happened last year with all of the drops, but it's very important that your receivers are available. Yes, injuries happen, and we know there's a suspension pending right now for Rashee Rice. We don't know if it's going to be this year or next year. We know it's going to be a lengthy one. And a lot of people are anticipating that it's going to be a half-season suspension. Listen, I'm not to get too off topic here, but let me just say this. I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised with the total number of games. I would not be shocked if it's 4 games. I think a lot of times we hear about these kinds of things and we're expecting a very hefty suspension and it just doesn't end up going that way. Don't be shocked if it's 4 games. I'm telling you right now, do not be shocked if it's 4 games. But to go back to the main topic here with Worthy, the question about him not practicing, he signed his contract, so he's not holding out or anything like that. Rookies have no reason to hold out. That'd be a little weird. I know Marvin Harrison Jr. was going through some things, but neither here nor there. Look, you're going into week 1 with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, again, pending a suspension, as your top wide receivers with did I say Hollywood Brown and Xavier? I meant Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice, and then Xavier Worthy as your slot receiver. I would imagine that's what the Chiefs receiving the offense is going to look like. Their main starters. Obviously, Travis Kelce, your tight end, Pacheco, your running back. So those are going to be your key guys at the on offense, your skill position players. An injury could happen to somebody. Obviously, we're starting off the season potentially with a suspension. So we're not exactly sure who's going to be available, but hopefully Xavier Worthy's hamstring injury is not as serious, and maybe he's being held out just for, just to be cautionary of things. I don't know exactly. I would imagine Andy Reid will speak to the media tomorrow, and maybe then we can get some answers. But I don't like to speculate too much on injury. I will say this. I do think that it's not anything worth being concerned about when we are in the middle of June the 12th, to be exact. Richard says Nico Remigio will make the team. He is a sleeper. A lot of people have been saying this. A lot of people feel like Remigio is somebody who's going to make the football team. So what's the maximum you can have wide receivers? 7, I would imagine. So who are the 7 wide receivers? Let's assume the Rashee Rice suspension won't be this year. It's going to be next year, which, by the way, I do think it will be in 2025 because the trial and all of that will take some time. Who are the 7 going to be? Let's go over this real quickly. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice. We're already at 3. I think Justin Watson has got a spot on the team with his speed. I know he had a lot of drops, but so did a lot of other guys. I like Justin Watson for depth purposes. I think that is where he excels the most. And he does have a pretty high yard per catch average on the team. So whatever his number is called, that's when he seems to deliver in depth situations. So I'm putting Justin Watson as my 4th receiver. I know he's had some issues here, but with Mecole Hardman, with his potential, you just can't give up on that. That's why they brought him back, I believe. So I'm going to go Mecole Hardman 5. Kadarius Toney is 6 for me. Who's number 7? Is it Justin Ross or is it Nico Remigio? Because whoever you don't, let's just say Justin Ross is 7. Remigio would probably be the guy on the practice squad. Now, depending, I completely forgot about Sky Moore. Heath even mentioned Tony and Sky. Yeah, I don't know who your 7. Let me go over this one more time. Hollywood, Rice, Worthy, Watson, Hardman. Those are 5. That's 5 so far. 6. I would have to say Tony. And then 7. Who's 7 going to be? Sky Moore, whose progress in the NFL has taken a very long time. Nico Remigio, who's shown some flashes. And then Justin Ross, who has all of this hype behind him with his potential, but we haven't seen it really come to fruition. Yeah, he had some drops last year, but so did everyone else. So I can kind of forgive that because he was not the only one. I would imagine Sky Moore and Nico Remigio are on the practice squad to start off. I'm very eager to see what the receiver room is going to look like going into week 1. It's going to be very interesting to see for sure. By the way, let's talk about Mecole Hardman for a moment here, because a week ago we did a podcast talking about Mecole Hardman, and I was asking, why is Mecole Hardman still available? And I kind of question, have the Chiefs moved on from him? Did he say some things about the Jets that maybe have teams in a position where they're staying away from Mecole Hardman? Why was Mecole Hardman available? Well, now he's not. He is back in Kansas City. Is having Mecole Hardman back in Kansas City a good thing? And that is a hard question to answer because he does come in with a mixed bag. He had a couple of games last year in the Week 18 game and in the wild card game where he was wide open but was unable to locate the ball when Blaine Gabbert in the Week 18 game and Patrick Mahomes in the wild card game threw the ball at his direction and he could not find the football at all for whatever reason. And then in the divisional round, he had 2 touches against the Bills, both of them inside the 5, fumbled both of them. One of them ended up going for a touchback. Fortunately, it didn't cost the Chiefs, but man, it was kind of a scary situation when you had an opportunity to go up by 10 on the road in the fourth quarter of a playoff game. But he kind of did make up for it as he went on. He had that big catch in the Super Bowl early in the game in double coverage. And then, of course, capping it off with the pre-snap route, throwing off Charvarius Ward, and then the corn dog play, catching the game-winning touchdown in overtime to win the Super Bowl. Mecole Hardman has had some really good moments, and he's had some really bad moments. in his career with the Chiefs. He's 26 years old too, so he's not very old either. This guy still has some room to grow. His best years may still be ahead of him. He has the potential. He's one of the fastest players in the NFL right now. But if he can erase those mistakes that he's made in the past with the drops and the fumbles, and he had some of those last year, but so did a lot of other guys on the team, Mecole Hardman might have a very good season. And keep in mind, Mecole Hardman's not a guy that's going to be relied upon as your number one receiver right now. Injuries can happen. But if in the unfortunate event there are injuries, Mecole Hardman might be able to step up when needed. However, as a depth player, I like what Mecole Hardman could bring to the table behind Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy. Could be one of the key contributors on this offense, even though it's a very crowded room. I think it's going to be an area where Mecole could still excel and contribute and get involved with this offense for sure. So, I've kind of gone back and forth so much because Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Mecole Hardman were both available for a long time this offseason. And I just kind of wondered, is Mecole a guy that you go after? We've had some discussions about this. And sure enough, the Chiefs decided to give Mecole Hardman another opportunity. So I'm not exactly sure what the future holds with this receiver room. We've got a lot of interesting names here on the wide receiver list. You got, a solid guy that it's going to get let go. I mean, look at last year. We thought the receiver room was going to be well prepared going into week one. Unfortunately, not the case, but got to the point where in the preseason, the Chiefs felt like they just didn't have the room for Amir Smith-Marset, so they ended up trading him for a 7th-round pick to the Carolina Panthers. So are you going to have that kind of a situation this year where you have someone that you could use as trade bait, whether it's Sky Moore or Nico Remigio? I'm not sure. But I think that could be an opportunity that's presented to the Chiefs, depending how things go in the preseason. Heath says Mecole shined bright when KC put up 4 TDs in the second quarter against the Raiders. I remember that one. That was when the Raiders got off to a 10-0 start, and then the Chiefs just went off, putting up 28 points in one quarter. This Chiefs team, and by the way, Tyreek Hill was injured, and he wasn't even playing in that game. The game that Heath is referring to. And then later that year, we saw the Chiefs put up 28 points in one quarter again. That was against the Texans in that really strange 24-0 deficit, which to me is still crazy that ever happened. But yeah, Mecole's had some moments. Like he was a Pro Bowl punt returner too as a rookie. I think his punt return in that 24-0 deficit against the Texans in the playoffs, that's kind of what jump-started the Chiefs as they tried to rally and surge. So, I'm not exactly sure, what it's going to take for Mecole Hardman, but he's had some flashes for sure. Teresa says Mahomes and Reed never gave up on Hardman in the last Super Bowl. I'm praying he has a breakout season. I hope so. I mean, this is a guy that has a lot of potential. When Tyreek Hill, when the audio came out about Tyreek Hill back in 2019, remember that? The Chiefs did not have a first-round pick. They traded that to get Frank Clark. So their first draft pick was in the second round, and they used it on Mecole Hardman because people thought that Tyreek Hill's days might be numbered in the NFL. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, a lot of things were cleared up, and he ended up continuing to play for the Chiefs and now the Miami Dolphins. But at the time, people thought that Mecole Hardman was a good replacement for Tyreek Hill. When Tyreek Hill, his name was cleared of the child abuse allegations, people wondered, and they said, look, you got Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and Sammy Watkins, and the Chiefs were able to do a lot of great things in 2019 with that crew, and in 2020 as well. Jesse said maybe a full camp will help Hardman. Maybe that's a good point, Jess. Like joining the team midseason last year, or returning to the team midseason last year, I guess is a more appropriate way of phrasing that. I mean, he knows the offense. Yeah, the Chiefs did transition from Bieniemy to Nagy. Maybe that's played a role because, and this is something I didn't realize until now, Mecole Hardman never had Matt Nagy as an offensive coordinator because Mecole was still in Georgia when Nagy was the offensive coordinator here before Bieniemy before Nagy took the Chicago Bears job. So yeah, Hardman wasn't even in Kansas City yet. So maybe that was part of it. I don't know. I think McCall knows the playbook, but can't read a defense, Heath says. That might be. Teresa says Hardman needs to stay healthy. You know, it's interesting. Teresa says that about Hardman and staying healthy because he's had some issues with that. You know what I recall? It was the San Francisco game. Didn't McCall have 3 touchdowns? Let me look that up because I want to make sure I have this correct about McCall Hardman. But I think there was a game against the 49ers in 2022 where McCall Hardman had 3 touchdowns against the 49ers. And after that, he suffered an injury and was gone for a long time. Didn't come back until the playoff. He had this weird thing where he was on the 21-day window, designated to return window, and he essentially was reinstated back to the 53-man roster at the 11th hour, which was weird. Okay, I have this pulled up. So in 2022, in week 7, the Chiefs visited the 49ers. I think they're visiting them in week 7 again this year. But he had 4 passes, one of them for a touchdown, and then he also had 2 rushing attempts in that game. Both of them went for touchdowns. So yeah, he had 3 touchdowns in that game. A week later against Tennessee, he had 6 catches for 79 yards. That was on Sunday Night Football. And that was also, he had a touchdown. He had 3 straight games with a receiving touchdown. So in a 3-week span, McCall Hardman had 5 touchdowns. And then after that, didn't play from week 9 all the way into the playoffs. The playoff game he returned was in the AFC Championship game, and he left that game with an injury and did not play in the following game in Super Bowl 57 against the Eagles. So, you know, and the reason I make a big deal about this because the comment of McCall Hardman needing to stay healthy. I remember when McCall Hardman got hurt and missed all of those games that year. A lot of Chiefs fans came around with McCall Hardman. McCall Hardman has faced a lot of criticism during his time in Kansas City. And what made people come around with McCall Hardman? His absence, which, you know, is kind of weird because whenever a player is struggling and maybe not producing as well as, you know, you expect from a player, you see a lot of players kind of turn on, or excuse me, a lot of fans turn on a player and say, well, he's injured now, better to part ways with him. No, oddly enough, his injury is kind of what made Chiefs fans rally around him and want him back even more. Maybe it has to do with the fact that he scored 5 touchdowns in a 3-week span before the injury. Maybe that played a role in people becoming a fan of McCall Hardman, but it was just really hard to kind of just get a grasp. Like, why is McCall Hardman not having the type of career you would like to see up to this point? Listen, we've seen some good from McCall Hardman and some bad at times. Just saw Mahomes enjoying NBA Game 3. Looks more stressed now than ever on the field. Oh yeah, looks like he's making that trip and then got to make it back because tomorrow is the final day of minicamp and the ring ceremony is also tomorrow. Drew Tranquil commented on that, talking about how he's going to get his first Super Bowl ring. So. Yeah, Mahomes, you know, when you got that charter flight, you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. So that's what Kelsey did when he was at the World Series on a Friday before that Broncos game. But anyway, Travis Kelce, speaking of him, did a press conference on Tuesday and had a lot of things to say. Of course, there were questions about his relationship with Taylor Swift. Evidently, she makes a mean Pop-Tart and mean cinnamon rolls. Gentlemen, get you a lady that makes you a mean Pop-Tart and a mean cinnamon roll. Get you a lady that can do that. But anyway, Travis Kelce, as far as football goes, did talk about retirement, or at least that's what was asked about him. And he just made it very clear that's just not something on his mind. He did, you know, I mean, he was pretty upfront and honest. He said that he knows it's coming up in his career and that he has so many opportunities in life that are being presented to him that he wants to pursue, but he also made it very clear that the three-peat is on his mind. Essentially, you know, he hinted that he wants to finish the remainder of the 2-year recently renegotiated contract on his deal for whatever is left of his NFL career. Could he maybe follow up with another 1-year deal? Who knows? Maybe. I've also seen people pose this question: could he retire if the Chiefs three-peat? I mean, what better way to ride off into the sunset? I mean, you might not be able to surpass Tony Gonzalez and all of his NFL career records for a tight end, but man, if you three-peat, who cares? Who cares about any of that stuff? Listen, I think it just depends on the type of season. Last year, if you told me in the middle of the season with Kelce, having kind of a step back year, a little bit of a step back, not a major step back, but with the injuries that he was dealing with, if you told me that Kelce would retire if the Chiefs won a Super Bowl, which they did, I would have believed you. But it's been the exact opposite, where Kelce, first of all, sitting out that Week 18 game against the Chargers, the self-imposed bye week, I like to call it, that paid off 100%. And you saw Kelce have a monster postseason. Played well against the Dolphins. Not great, but played well. Stepped up and had a monster 2-touchdown game against the Bills. He had a monster game against the Ravens, especially in that first half. Had a very quiet first half against the 49ers in the Super Bowl, but absolutely dominated in the second half and in overtime. So Kelce's had some moments, and I just kind of wonder, with what the Chiefs offense has this year, there's not going to be a lot of pressure on Kelce. You have Isaiah Pacheco, who has 2 years under his belt now. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming back. You have Luis Rizame, part of that running back group, and might even play some wide receiver this year. We all know about his speed and what he can do. And then you have Rashee Rice coming back with a year of experience under his belt. You have Hollywood Brown, who has a few years of experience coming into the Chiefs. You have Xavier Worthy, who is your rookie, and not a rookie that's, going to be pressured to do things right away. He's going to be able to comfortably contribute in this offense, knowing that he's got so many other weapons around him. And then we talked about this already with the wide receiver, some of the depth that you see on the scene with Watson, Tony Hardman, and so on. There's a possibility that Kelce might not get 1,000 receiving yards. And to be honest, not because I think Kelce's terrible, but because I think, there's so many guys to throw the football around that I think this might benefit Kelce. And look, maybe he still gets 1,000 receiving yards. I don't know. But what I do know is there's not going to be a lot of pressure on Travis Kelce this year. This might be Travis Kelce's best season that he's entering in terms of the fact that he's 34 years old and is going to turn 35 during the season. And he has, coming off a couple of injuries last year, this is a situation for him where he doesn't have to be the top guy that's relied upon every single play. Because last year, we all know the story. There was no true standout number one wide receiver. Everybody was dropping passes left and right, including Kelce. It wasn't just the wide receivers. The tight ends contributed to that as well. The running backs were guilty of that as well. But man, this year it's like you have a far more reliable group of players on offense. The depth on this team right now is ridiculous. And I think Noah Gray, I know there's a lot of hype behind Jared Wiley, the draft pick from TCU, I believe. But I think Noah Gray, don't count him out. This is a guy that whenever his number is called on the field, he's stepped up and done well, I think, for a number 2 tight end. And he's definitely made some progress, and he's grown over the years. Blake Bell is not on the team, at least for right now. So this is, a team that's definitely ready to use Noah Gray more, I think. And I'm excited to see that. So what does a potential workload for Kelce look like in 2024? Considering all of those things I just mentioned, statistically, I don't know exactly. I would not be surprised if he has another season when it comes to receiving yards similar to last year, where he was so close to 1,000 receiving yards. The way I see it, I think Kelce will either fall short of 1,000 receiving yards in 2024 or will surpass it by just a little bit. Because again, you have Hollywood Brown, you have Rashee Rice. Go back and watch if you guys have NFL Plus, or if you have games on your DVR, or even just YouTube highlights. Go look up some of the playoff games and go look what Rashee Rice did in the playoffs for the Chiefs. First of all, this guy had 2 touchdowns in the playoffs get called back. So what you see on the stat sheet for Rashee Rice in the postseason last year, he did more than what you'll see. And I think for a guy like Rice, again, we know, we don't know about a suspension just yet. But he did talk to the media this past weekend for the first time and did talk about his learning lesson and all of this and the progress he's trying to make from all of this, which is very important because this is a player that will absolutely have a great career if he stays on the field and avoids trouble. And hopefully this offseason was a huge learning lesson for him because there's a lot to learn for sure. But the car accident, the bar incident, we don't know exactly what happened with the bar deal, but supposedly that case has been closed. And it seems like, what was claimed didn't end up being true. Something obviously happened. But again, if you're Rashee Rice, you got to just be aware that nothing good happens after midnight, especially in clubs, these kinds of places. So hopefully the Chiefs can have him for a long time because he can do a lot of great things if he stays out of trouble. Him and Xavier Worthy together for a long time here in Kansas City, boy, that is a duo I would not want to mess with. I mean, Xavier Worthy has the potential to be similar to a Tyreek Hill or a Deshaun Jackson, 100%. But all in all, this puts a lot of pressure away from Travis Kelce and Mahomes. Rochelle said this in the chat here. Mahomes has a lot of guys to throw to. I mean, the ball distribution this year is going to be a lot of fun to watch with the Chiefs. Let's see. Okay, we covered all the Travis Kelce stuff. Chris Jones spoke today. Chris Jones had a lot to say. He had a lot to say in his press conference. So if you guys recall, earlier in the offseason, the NFLPA report card came out and Clark Hunt received an F-, ranking the worst grade in the NFL among NFL owners. When Chris Jones got his new contract a couple of weeks after that, one of the tweets he put out there was that Clark Hunt is an A+ owner. That's what Chris Jones said. And I believe this is Chris Jones' first time speaking to the media since then. So Chris Jones was asked about this in today's press conference, and he said he has, quote, 2 middle fingers, end quote, for anybody that gave Clark Hunt an F- or anyone who thinks Clark Hunt deserved the F- grade. He has 2 middle fingers for anyone that thinks Clark Hunt deserved the F- grade. He basically just said, fuck all y'all who don't like Clark Hunt. Oh, man. I wish Chris Jones had a podcast. I would listen to that on repeat. Look, obviously, Mahomes, Kelce, Jones, they're going to have good things to say about Clark Hunt. Why did Clark Hunt get an F- grade? I have no idea. I really don't. I'm not there. I don't talk to Clark Hunt. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors. I mean, the Chiefs have a lot of things to figure out with their grades. I actually had a conversation about this the other day because the situation with BJ Thompson getting rushed to the hospital, Harrison Butker was the one who rushed to the medical team to try to give attention to BJ Thompson. And a lot of people then talked about the work that Rick Burkholder and his team did. Rick Burkholder has had a failing grade 2 years in a row now, which is shocking to all of us because we always hear great things about Rick Burkholder. And a lot of people I saw on social media say, hope those players think about the grade they give Burkholder this time. Which, again, I don't know why Burkholder gets that grade. That's shocking to me and a lot of people. So, Again, listen, obviously, like Mahomes, there are a lot of rumors about the 2020 pandemic. And look, I'm not here to have a debate about the pandemic and the rules that were applied. But what were we told? We were all told that every single one of us need to do our job to help reduce the spread. So in the NFL, what did they do? They did not allow family members and friends to be in VIP areas. I'm sure you guys have seen Brittany Mahomes, several other people who are in VIP areas before football games. However, there's some talk out there that Patrick Mahomes and his family, they were given some special treatment, let's just say. So they were an exception to the rule. And I think, again, these are rumors, nothing's confirmed, but the rumor out there is that a lot of other players were upset because they were told that because of the pandemic, because of COVID, they could not have family around certain places. Yet Patrick Mahomes and his family, they were allowed to do those things. I can understand the frustration because it's like, hey, we were in a global pandemic and we were told every single person needs to do this, but we made exceptions for big people, I guess. But at the end of the day, not that I agree with it. We know that in this society, those in high places get special treatment. That's really the way it works. I'm not defending it. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just telling you that is the way society goes. So Chris Jones, yeah, I'm sure Chris Jones, he's probably been given some special treatment. I'm sure his family has been given the VIP experience over the years during his time in Kansas City. So perhaps that's why Chris Jones is fighting hard against anyone that thinks Clark Hunt deserved the F- grade. By the way, it's his teammates that gave him the grade. And let me clarify on something here, because I see people on social media saying, oh, other players voted on this. Why would Daniel Jones vote on Clark Hunt or vote on the Chiefs training staff or vote on the Chiefs locker room? Can we just think about that for a moment? Because I've seen a lot of people put out there on social media, which again, this is the danger of social media. We have a lot of fake news because of one or two people, they say something and it just spreads like wildfire. People take it as gospel. For whatever reason, there is a preconceived notion that players from other teams got to vote for other teams. Okay, folks, that would be like a high school student. Like, let's say a high school student at Lee Summit North votes on the principal for Blue Springs South. Does that make any sense to you whatsoever? No, it doesn't. Again, it's like a high school student getting surveyed and giving answers about the locker room, the gym, the library from a different high school. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know how that rumor started, but that is a thing out there essentially. So I'm sure Chris Jones, given the treatment he's received in the past from the Chiefs and the Hunt family, he had a lot of great things to say about the Hunt family. So he definitely had a lot to say. 2 middle fingers. He actually gave the bird 2, not to anyone in that room, but he had it on camera. Never change, Chris Jones. Never change. Let's see here. Chris Jones was also asked about the 20 sacks because he tweeted earlier in the offseason that he's going to get 20 sacks. Can he get 20 sacks? His season best was 15.5 in 2018 and 2022. He's had double-digit sacks 3 times in his career, and he's right now coming off back-to-back seasons with double-digit sacks. And consider the fact that last year he didn't play in the first game. You guys all know about that. He was sitting in the suite watching the game on Thursday night against Detroit. I hope Chris Jones gets 20 sacks. I hope he gets Defensive Player of the Year. He's talked about wanting to attain that. But can Chris Jones get that? Listen, I know there's 17 games, and he obviously owns the NFL record for consecutive games with a sack. I think he had like 11 games in a row with a sack back in 2018. That was 2018. We're in 2024 now. Not to say Chris Jones has gotten worse. I think he's gotten better. But getting sacks, yeah, especially from the middle, and I know they line up in different spots in different situations, 20 sacks is still very difficult to do, even with a 17-game schedule. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that this year. I don't think he gets 20 sacks. Do I think he can get 15, 14, 15, 16, somewhere around there? Yes. I think that's attainable for Chris Jones. And I think he will get that. 20, boy, that's an uphill battle. I don't think he does. And you know what? I'll tell you guys this right now. Screen record this. Do whatever you got to do to keep the receipts. Because I'm saying no to Chris Jones 20 sacks. If he gets it, I will give away a Chris Jones jersey. Let's do it. Let me read a couple of comments here. Teresa's asking, what does the University of Texas have to do with the Chiefs except players we recruited from? I don't know, Teresa. I'm not sure. I mean, this is in response to another question. Hunt cannot compare to the money the University of Texas puts into training facilities or locker rooms. They didn't have to pay players. Okay, so here's my thing. If you're the Chiefs, you have two division rivals that have brand new facility, brand new stadiums. And I think, Clark Hunt kind of feels the Chiefs right now are trying to figure out what they're going to do with their future stadium and potentially practice facility. So they have a lot of things to figure out. And I think this is definitely, especially when you spend a week in Vegas for Super Bowl 58 using the Raiders practice facilities, you have an opportunity to really try to learn from that and try to build something better than what they have. Can they? I don't know. We'll see. Teresa says, don't other employees grade the owners and coaches, not just the players? I'm not exactly sure how that works. I believe they may, and maybe we don't see that. But this is strictly, to my knowledge, from the NFLPA, the Players Association. These are grades from the players, to my understanding. If the players are not complaining about the locker room, why should we? It's a good question, Rochelle. I mean, listen, we're not in the locker room, but you do want your players to be covered. And listen, as far as I recall, the locker room did have a failing grade, or at least a really bad. The only good grade the Chiefs had was head coach. For obvious reasons. Like, we're not going to get into that. But everything else was a bad grade. I don't think they had anything else other than D's and F's across the board. Here's why I think as fans we should care. Do any of these things impact us? Does Clark Hunt impact us? Does the locker room impact us? No, we never see those things. We're never there. But you do want your favorite players to be treated well, right? I'm not suggesting that, the Willie Gay departure or any other recent departure in the last year or two from the Chiefs has anything to do with the bad grades. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But obviously the Chiefs feel a certain type of way about that. That's what I think of when I think of the NFLPA report card. It's been brought up recently. Maybe Clark Hunt gets asked about it in training camp whenever he's available to the media. I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure Clark Hunt's going to be asked about a lot of things the next time he's available with the media. Let's see. What else did I want to cover here? I mentioned Justin Ross. He had a couple of touchdowns today in practice with Patrick Mahomes. Hollywood Browns looked really good so far in OTAs and mandatory minicamp. I did want to talk about this. CBS Sports put out their top 10 best backup quarterback situations and put out the list of the top 10 best backup quarterbacks. Guess who was number one? Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was ranked as the best backup quarterback in the NFL right now. God forbid the Chiefs need Carson Wentz for long-term purposes on the team this year, but in the event Mahomes misses a game or two, maybe even longer than that, hopefully not, Carson Wentz fits the system very well. He knows the system from his time working with Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, because as we all remember, Doug Peterson was the offensive coordinator here in Kansas City, and his success here is what allowed him to become the head coach of the Eagles. And one of the first moves he made was getting Carson Wentz. Yeah, he says hope he doesn't have to prove it. Yeah, I sure as hell hope not either. Hopefully the only time we really see much of him is maybe in the fourth quarter of blowout victories, or maybe a possible blowout loss here and there, which is not often with Kansas City, as we all know. But look at what happened last year. Deshaun Watson, the Browns went through a myriad of injuries, and they still found a way to keep winning football games. The Bengals lost Joe Burrow, and everybody thought their season was done. They didn't make the playoffs, but they came pretty damn close, and finished above 500, finishing last place in a very competitive division. Fell just one game short. I think they were if there was an 8th seed in the NFL for the playoffs, they would have been the 8th seed last year. There were a lot of quarterbacks that went down with injuries, and we still saw teams be competitive even though they lost their quarterback. Listen, I've always said injuries to me are never an excuse. I think last year that really panned out to be true, especially when we saw some teams with backup quarterbacks still finding a way to win football games, especially Cleveland, of all teams. I mean, they were still finding ways to win. And the Joe Flacco story, I know it ended pretty badly, but boy, that was a lot of fun to kind of get behind. Like me personally, I kind of found myself in a position like, if the Chiefs could not win it all, I kind of hope it's Cleveland, because that story is a lot of fun to get behind. So to me, again, hopefully this is not the case, but we've seen a lot of different backup quarterbacks step up and do well for the Chiefs. We saw Matt Moore play very well for a couple of games. We saw Chad Henne come in certain situations, multiple playoff games where Chad Henne helped the Chiefs keep their leads in the playoffs. I mean, what a better time to step up as a longtime player in the NFL, longtime veteran. And it's almost like he knew what to do, prepared for it, of course. You had Blaine Gabbert, who was never needed in emergency situations. The only time we really saw Blaine Gabbert was when the Chiefs were winning in blowout. They had blowout wins. Because I remember he played in that Chicago game. There was another game. I just can't recall off the top of my head when else he played. But he didn't look really good in either of those games. Now you have Carson Wentz, a guy who at one point was in the discussion for MVP. Unfortunately, he has not been the same since that year, because he went down with an injury and he has to watch his team win a Super Bowl from the sidelines. Kind of reminded me a lot of Alex Smith in 2011 or 2012, when he was having a very good season. I think the 49ers were 8-1 or 9-1 up until that point. He goes down with an injury and Colin Kaepernick comes in, and Smith was able to come back from the injury, but the 49ers decided to continue with Kaepernick, and Smith had to watch his team play in the Super Bowl from the sidelines. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but still not easy to have to watch that. Not easy for anyone. I know Trent Green went through that in St. Louis, where he had that injury. Kurt Warner comes in, Rams going to win the Super Bowl that year. So we've seen that a few times, but man, you just don't want that to be the case. But if that does end up being the case, I think Carson Wentz is fully equipped with what he needs to work with on this offense. He's got a lot of great guys, and arguably the best head coach he's ever had to play for. And the most important part is, and I said this right away when he signed with the Chiefs, he knows the offense. He already had a lot of familiarity with the offense coming in. So he knows a lot of what's expected if his name is ever needed on the field. So we'll see how that goes this year for the Chiefs. Hopefully don't see it, as we've already established earlier. Don't want to see it, but if in the event the Chiefs need him, I think the Chiefs are still in good position. A couple of things I want to get into here. Aaron Rodgers. he is skipping mandatory minicamp for what we've been told is an event important to him. Robert Saleh said that on Tuesday. Robert Saleh did some PR damage control today and is like, yeah, me and Aaron are on the same page. Okay. I think that's a PR answer there, meaning the PR staff told you to say that. Meanwhile, Colin Cowherd on his radio show stated that a source told him that Rodgers is on vacation overseas, and the source told Cowherd that more details will come about later this week. Okay. I mean, for whatever that's worth to you. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of mock Aaron Rodgers because I guess Rodgers made a comment at one point saying that the non-football bullshit needs to be out the door and football needs to be football. Okay. I mean, I don't really see the need for that. I know we're in an era where people need to be witty and funny. And okay, I do that. I'm guilty of that sometimes, but oh well. Let me say this. I don't think this is a serious deal because Aaron Rodgers was there for all of the voluntary OTA practices, right? So if he's there for all of the voluntary stuff, but misses the 3 days of mandatory minicamp, I don't know if we need to be up in arms about this. I mean, listen, I know a lot of you guys are Chiefs fans listening to this, but I kind of just feel inclined to talk about this because it is getting a lot of attention. I personally feel like people are making a big deal out of nothing. He was still there for all of the voluntary stuff, which is important. Now, if he was skipping all of the voluntary and mandatory stuff, yeah, I'd be a little concerned there, but he's missing 3 days of practice. Doing what? I don't know. Should he be at mandatory minicamp? Yeah. I know he missed last year. He only played 4 snaps last year. So there's definitely somebody who needs to get the offense down and whatnot. Not to say he can't. I mean, this guy's the sharpest quarterback in NFL history, in my opinion. So it is a little weird that he's missing mandatory minicamp. But he is Aaron Rodgers. I mean, this is a 4-time NFL MVP. Let's be clear about that. So I'm not so sure if there's anything to worry about with him not showing up to mandatory minicamp. He might have a personal matter. He might be at an event that's very important to him that just happened to be scheduled on the same week. Here's another thing too. It's like he spent all of last offseason dedicating himself to learning the Jets offense, and obviously he's familiar with Nathaniel Hackett, so he doesn't need that much more familiarity, but obviously some things are going to change, so he's got to get all that down. He dedicated all of that stuff last year and is just fine this year. So I don't think it is all a big deal that people are making it out to be. That's just what I think. How do you guys feel about that? Because again, I think people are truly overhyping this and maybe trying to listen. I know Aaron Rodgers, I guess he's controversial because of some things that he has said over time, and he also like loves to play the victim card about how he's silenced, even though he's like on the most popular sports show every week during football season, and he did hours of long podcasts with Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson. It's like, dude, come on, no one's silencing you. So listen, I agree, Rochelle. It will be interesting to see Rodgers play this season. There's been a lot of investment with that Jets offense, and unfortunately, we never got to see it last year. But I think if you are the Jets, you have a reason to be excited for this upcoming season. The Bills, their window, I think, is closing more and more every year. The Dolphins, they've got a lot of firepower, but they have to prove that they can beat good football teams. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think they beat a team with a winning record last year. So the Jets, that door is wide open in that division. If Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, I think the Jets are going to have a very good season. I know a lot of people think the Bills are going to miss the playoffs. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to subscribe to that idea yet, though I'm not too far away from it. I mean, you have the AFC North, which is very competitive. You're going to have a couple of teams from that division. And I think you're going to have a couple of teams from the AFC East. I think the Chargers are a team that's poised for improvement. I don't think they're going to get in front of the Chiefs in the AFC West, but I think they're a team that can definitely be the second best in the division here. So, yeah, I mean, the Bills do have some tough competition, especially if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. The AFC is going to be very interesting this year, for sure. I'm very curious to see how all of that is going to unfold in 2024. Teresa says, returning off of Achilles injury, his play will be, yeah. I mean, what kind of Aaron Rodgers are we going to see in his first game back? We only got to see it for 4 steps. So we never got to see Aaron Rodgers last year. And for crying out loud, man, just give us one Aaron Rodgers versus Patrick Mahomes matchup. They have tried to schedule this so many times that we've never seen it. And then Rodgers, he lost twice in the NFC title game. Both years the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl back-to-back in 2019 and 2020. So it's like, man, we've had like 5 opportunities for this matchup, and we just never get it. I don't think they're on the schedule. They're not on the schedule this year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But hopefully he stays healthy. I think it'd be great for the NFL. It's going to make for a very competitive division and conference. A lot of people were talking about that last year, and we didn't see as much of that because Rodgers got hurt, Burrow got hurt, Watson got hurt. So, you know, if those quarterbacks can stay healthy, I think it's going to be a very interesting year for the AFC. And trust me, like, you're going to see 1 or 2 good teams that will miss the playoffs. I mean, that's just going to be the case. It's not everyone can make it. Only 7 per conference. Yeah, see, this is my thing, Keith. Like, he will be there for the first day of training camp. That is the big thing I forgot to mention. Aaron Rodgers 100% will be present at Jets training camp on day 1. Mark my words. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Hey, the NBA Finals are on right now. I know the NBA Finals and the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, they have not been competitive at all. They've been actually, you know, kind of boring. So we'll see what happens here. But nonetheless, a lot of things we covered here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I will say this: we're only going to do 2 more episodes, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break in the first couple of weeks of July. So, and listen, it's July. There's not a lot to talk about. Training camp will be around the corner when we come back. So we're going to do 2 more episodes of the Chiefs Zone podcast before we go on a nice little break in July. We'll be doing the Red Friday live chats as well, so be on the lookout for that. We'll have one this Friday. So not exactly sure what time we'll do the Red Friday live chat. Last week was kind of a disaster because of my Wi-Fi, so apologies for that. Hopefully we'll have a better Red Friday live chat this Red Friday. So be on the lookout for that. Other than that, I'm Farzin Vousoughian. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell a friend if you haven't already. For those of you who listened and watched live on Facebook and YouTube, thank you guys. I appreciate all of you guys. I am out. Talk to you all later. Take care.